welcome to Daily Debrief from People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we go to Sri Lanka first, which has got a new Prime Minister in the midst of a massive economic crisis. Next, we talk about the movement to free Palestinian health activist Shatha Odeh. And in Pakistan, a court has given Pashtun leader Ali Wazir bail in a 2-year-old hate speech case. United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe is Sri Lanka's new Prime Minister. He will now have to steer the country out of its most severe economic crisis and growing political instability. Shortages have sparked protests across the country. Violence across the country led to resignations of the government led by Mahinda Rajapaksa earlier this week. Sri Lanka's government has struggled to come up with a solution to its deepening economic crisis. Shreya from People's Dispatch is here with more details. Shreya, can you talk about what sparked this current situation and what the government of Sri Lanka is doing to solve it?
All right, Pragya, let's take a look at the events that happened yesterday and shortly after Mahinda Rajapaksa, the former Prime Minister, resigned. In the Gazette notification that was released from the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's office, it mentioned that an all-party interim government will be formed. So throughout this week, there was no government really in Sri Lanka, with the cabinet having fully resigned. So yes, we saw that the president first approached Sajith Premadasa, the leader of opposition in the parliament of the SJB party, who initially rejected the position of a prime minister on the condition that until the president resigns, he will not take up the prime ministerial position. Shortly after which, we started hearing that UNP's, United National Party's Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has already served 5 terms as Prime Minister in the history of Sri Lanka, will now be taking up the Prime Ministerial position. He took oath yesterday evening on May 12th. And as these rumors started coming in before the oath taking, we saw a lot of resentment to this decision of the president to appointing Ranil Wickremesinghe as the prime minister. Religious leaders have called it unconstitutional. Not only the opposition, which has questioned this appointment. So one point to note is that this is not an election of the prime minister. This is an appointment of the prime minister who has come to power with a lot of support from the majority ruling party, Rajapaksa's party. Right. So that's that. What we know of is that 160 members out of the 225-member parliament has supported this decision. And in the latest updates from an hour ago, several parties and independent lawmakers in the Sri Lankan parliament, they have withdrawn the decision of supporting Wickremesinghe.
Okay.
So that's what's the latest in Sri Lanka right now.
Okay, so will the decision to actually have a new Prime Minister change the situation in Sri Lanka? Is it going to help in any way resolve the crisis that they have?
Pragya, the question of change in terms of a political change was sparked yesterday from Gotabaya Rajapaksa's televised speech, where he mentioned that executive presidency format of the political system in Sri Lanka will be considered once this all-party cabinet comes into power and it commences work. And similarly, that was actually a shock because this has been the demand of the anti-government protests that have been happening since April. And after a long time of silence, which Gotabaya Rajapaksa did not really acknowledge the opposition to him, to mention it in a speech is important to note. And second of all, in his speech, he also mentioned that the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka, which empowers the Parliament as opposed to the 20th Amendment, which gives sweeping powers to the President, it is the former that will be reenacted in the Parliament, and this looks like some kind of political change may be possible. But at the same time, we have to remember that Ranil Wickremesinghe is really an ally of the Rajapaksas.
So, Shreya, can you tell us a little bit more about who is Ranil Wickremesinghe exactly?
Okay, so Ranil Wickremesinghe, he has come to power as the 26th Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. He will be serving, like I mentioned, his 6th term after not at all completing his last 5 terms. So he is one of those people who has not completed any of these 5 terms, and he's back in office for the 6th term. Ranil Wickremesinghe is actually, interestingly, the only representative in the Sri Lankan parliament of his party, the United National Party. So he's the single seat holder of UNP in the parliament. That's why a lot of people are raising questions about the constitutionality of this election, of this appointment. So that's one of the things. Interestingly, the Sajid Premadasa, who was the first choice of the president in his own words, he was earlier a member of UNP who broke away from the UNP in the 2020 parliamentary elections. So he's an older aide turned enemy of the now Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and it's interesting how Sajid Premadasa, he actually, after rejecting the offer of Prime Ministership, he accepted it within like an hour or two later with the conditions that I mentioned. So Ranil's appointment, it holds skepticism from every faction of the country, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see whether he's really able to solve the economic crisis like he has promised.
All right, Shreya, thanks very much for that update. In Pakistan, Ali Wazir, a prominent leader of the Pashtun Tahaffuz or protection movement, who is also a member of the National Assembly, has got bail. The Sindh High Court said the provincial police acted in a monarchical manner when it arrested him. The arrest took place 2 years ago based on a hate speech that he allegedly made. However, the police had failed to find witnesses or produce the transcript of the speech in court. Abdul is here to tell us more about this case. Abdul, what was this speech all about and what is the issue that he keeps raising?
Well, the PTM is a party which is primarily based among the minority Pashtun ethnic groups. We know that in the north west of Pakistan, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and other regions around it, there are a substantial number of Pashtuns, and they have grievances against the Pakistani state, primarily related to their persecution. So they accuse the Pakistan army of basically leading a campaign against the people. And when Ali Wazir was speaking in December 2022, he was primarily mentioning that how Pakistani state and Pakistani army in particular has kind of created a vicious campaign against the minority Pashtuns. They have been persecuted, they have been killed. 13 of his own family members, his extended family members, have been killed. So he was raising that issue, and that basically, of course, the state, which we all know how prominent army is in Pakistan's politics, it became an issue. Though there were other people also who were charged in a FIR because of which he was arrested, none of others were arrested, only Ali Wazir was arrested because of his history of a militant kind of movement against the Pakistani state's attempts to persecute the minorities. So that is the basic, you can say, the gist of the case. As you rightly mentioned, in last 2 years, almost 2 years when he was in the prison, none of the witnesses were examined. The police did not produce any evidence to prove basically the charge sheet, what we call.
Right.
Correct. None of this happened primarily because the intention was not to kind of try him formally. The intention was to kind of show yet another attempt to show that the Pashtuns, what is the basic status of Pashtun in Pakistan politics.
All right. So what happens next then? Does he come out of jail now? What are the next steps we can expect?
We don't know. Last time when he was arrested, he was granted bail in some other case. Mm-hmm. So just like in several other countries, the authoritarian state system, the dominant sections, all those people who have dissenting voices, all those, and PTM has become quite popular. He's himself as an elected member. One of the members of his party was considered to be the minister. He was about to become a minister in previous Imran Khan government. So given his popularity, given his mass appeal, if you see the PTM's rallies in Pakistan, they are quite huge. The ruling establishment, and particularly the army, is not very happy with this. Now that there is a change in the government, Imran
Right.
Khan has been replaced and new government has come into power, we are not so sure about the equations between the PTM, the army and the ruling establishment at this moment. So it is difficult to say which way it will turn out. But I think, given the history, he will not be allowed to function freely for the simple reason that there are vested interest in the Pakistani state who do not want PTM to grow, primarily because, as I said before, the issue of Pashtun is an issue. The persecution of Pashtuns is happening because of in the name of terrorism, fighting against terrorism, taking action against extremism and so on and so forth.
Right.
So those allegations are made primarily to kind of discourage a kind of assertion which are made by the sections of the population which has been denied their due, their rights in the Pakistan politics. So of course the ruling establishment will not like to see him free for a longer time. Yeah.
All right. Abdul, thank you very much for that update. Palestinian nurse and health activist Shatha Odeh has been sentenced to 16 months of prison and a $9,000 fine by an Israeli military tribunal on May 12, which was also International Nurses Day. Shatha was given a 5-year suspended sentence on the condition that she does not provide health services. She was arrested from her home by Israeli forces in July 2021. Odeh had defied an Israeli military order to shut down health work committees in Palestine for 6 months. We spoke to Anna from the People's Health Movement today about this issue. Welcome, Anna. Can you begin with telling us how is it possible that the Israeli forces can ask an NGO to stop providing health services and arrest the person who was doing her work? Can you just give us a background to this case?
Yes, of course. So what we are actually talking about is a systemic attack of the Israeli occupying forces against Palestinian civil society in general. So it's not only about healthcare organizations, but it's about all kinds of organizations that work with the community, that work with Palestinians. And so what this campaign consists of is smear campaigns and smear attempts, putting out allegations against civil society organizations in Palestine, against community leaders, and alleging that they have ties to terrorism. And of course, on the basis of these fabricated allegations, the Israeli occupying forces are then able to shut down whole organizations, imprison the activists, and this is exactly what happened to Shatha Odeh in the last year or a bit less. So basically, if we look at only October last year, what happened was that the occupying forces did this to at least 6 organizations in Palestine, and these included organizations that work on children's rights, on women's rights, on support for prisoners. So, you know, it's really hitting hard at all the essential services, at all the essential work that people need to basically live. And so shutting down this organization has a devastating effect on the people of Palestine, because in most cases, it is exactly these organizations who are the only ones who are doing any work to guarantee that the minimum of the minimums of rights are met in Palestine. And of course, the Israeli occupying forces are not doing that themselves. So, you know, hitting on someone who is doing it has a very practical and a very, effect that is felt immediately.
So, Anna, can you also tell us what was the work that Odeh was doing and what are the chances now of her release? Because there were a series of petitions asking for her to be released. What is the situation right now?
So to begin with, maybe just a bit about the Health Work Committee, which is the organization that Shatha works for, which she actually is the director of. It's a Palestinian organization that provides health services. It works especially with poor and marginalized communities. It also does very important work in the field of health development. And so since we know that the Israeli occupation has implications on how the health system works in Palestine, how much stress it causes and how much barriers it erects in front of Palestinians who are seeking care, you know, it's quite clear that health work committees have played an essential role in guaranteeing the right to health for Palestinians. And if we look at the period since the Health Work Committee was established, until the last time that we looked at the numbers, they had provided healthcare to approximately 400,000 people. So it's an enormous amount of people. And now there's a question of how these Palestinians are actually going to find an alternative, and how and if they are going to be able to access care.
Right.
And so these are all things that have been recognized also at the level of the World Health Organization. So the Director General is very much aware in each of his reports that the Israeli occupation has an effect on how people can access healthcare in Palestine. It's about bureaucratic obstacles, it's about checkpoints, it's about people having to apply for permits if they want to accompany family members, their children, to seek healthcare. So it's really not, it's a really harmful system in the way that healthcare is affected, and of course all the other aspects of life. And so if we look at what the future brings at the moment, so the sentence only came in yesterday, so it remains to be seen, how things are going to evolve with time. What we do know is that the organizations who have been campaigning on Shatha's release, and these include, frontline defenders, it includes Viva Salud, it includes People's Health Movement. They're all quite, they have all, they basically stood up quite strongly in the condemnation of this sentence and said already that they would continue campaigning for Shatha's rights, for the right to health of Palestinians, and that it should not be taken that the sentence that we have heard yesterday is the end of the campaigning and mobilizing efforts that we have seen over the past 10 months.
All right. Thank you very much for that update, Anna. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you again on updates for this. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. That is all we have today. Please come back to us tomorrow and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And for more stories from around the world, please read peoplesdispatch.org.